thanks so much for joining. My name is Jonas Sertle. I'm working out of the Geneva office of the UN Institute for Training and Research. We are one of the co-founders of the University Global Coalition, and really happy about this annual gathering, the second time that we meet virtually, not with some technical difficulties, but we are certain that we will make it an interesting and fun session. I'm joined here by Scott Strachan and Louise Logan from University of Strathclyde, and they will introduce themselves, of course, as well, but just a few words about them. So Scott is the co-director of the vertically integrated project for sustainable development at University of Strathclyde, and he will present some of the activities that the university has undertaken with these projects, and we will come to that in a second. And then Louise is joining us also from University of Strathclyde, a colleague of Scott and Louise. Just bear with me. You had sent me your bio, of course. You are a Learning Enhancement Officer at the University of Strathclyde and the Program Coordinator for these vertically integrated projects for sustainable development. So we are, of course, super happy to have you join and with your proposal to come through here. And I mean, to frame the session a little bit, I mean, the main rooms and the different breakout sessions have tackled different aspects of how to integrate the sustainable development goals or education for sustainable development, as Scott and Louise, you are framing it, into the curriculum and research. And today we have this exciting project and the session that we have here with examples and practices of how to activate students to go through their undergrad degree with one project, a research project that they can focus on, and bringing them together also with students of different disciplines. So we want to learn from Scott and from Louise about your practice and your learning, of course. And since we talked a little bit prior to the session, of course, I mean, Scott, your thought was you wanted to end up on a few of the challenges that have arisen, of course, also within the university, but of course also externally, maybe with some of the questions that employers have brought to you from the students that have gone through those projects. All of this is, of course, we want to make this session applicable and effective for anybody who is listening in and watching us here right now. So in the context of other universities, in the context of other organizations, what can they learn from your experiences at University of Strathclyde? So with that, I'm handing over to you, Scott. Then I think, Louise, you handle that. You have a few slides that we can see already in front of us. And please also, I mean, add any points that I didn't mention now from your bios that you think might be useful for anybody who is watching us right now to see and to know. And then for all people who are watching us right now, please do use the chat function that you can see on your screen to ask questions or make comments throughout the presentation. And Scott and Louise have timed it so that we have ample time at the end to go into that. And so I hope that the audience here will give us lots of prompts, but use the chat function already throughout the presentation. So with that said, over to you, I think, Scott, and then you manage the slides from your end before we go then in this all view modus again after your slides are over. So thanks so much again, Scott and Louise, for joining us, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jonas. Thanks for that introduction. Greatly appreciated. Yeah, so today, as Jonas has said, myself and Louise are here to speak to you about a practical example of embedding ESD as we see it within undergraduate curricula. So be able to give you a quick overview of the programme that we've developed at Strathclyde to embed specifically research-based education for sustainable development in our curricula, and to share some of the views we've taken along our journey, which has been perhaps closer to the one on the left here than the one on the right, as we went from pilot to mainstream educational offering at Strathclyde, and how it's paved the way for a broader ESD agenda to emerge at Strathclyde. So I wanted to start with this quote, get us all in the right frame of mind. inspire us, motivate us, and really just to frame why we're doing what we're doing. So we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds. So you probably, or some of you may recognise this as the famous words spoken by John F. Kennedy during his famous moon speech at Rice Stadium. He went on to say, people ask why the moon? Well, because we choose to go to the moon. This challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. And as we all know, this led to one of humankind's greatest achievements. I'm an engineer. It was certainly one of our greatest engineering achievements. The moonshot, that was one of our finest hours, arguably. One that created a unifying sense of optimism and what could be achieved by human endeavour. For many in mission control that day, this was their first job since graduating from university. Most had been appointed to engineering and scientific sections based solely on application forms and college grades without any interview, no previous work experience. So perhaps one of the most incredible facts about this achievement is that the average age of mission control that day was 27. But on the 19th of July 1969, they proved they were capably up to the challenge. Today, the same words have an eerie resonance in the context of the new grand and global challenge of our time, or challenges of our time. Not an extraterrestrial challenge to explore unknown worlds, but an existential challenge to save the world we know. An earthshot challenge, not motivated by vanity or ideology, quite simply by need. And just as we turn to the optimism and the idealism and the confidence and fearlessness and the talent of youth to explore the new frontiers of space, we'll need the youth of today and future generations to help us navigate our way to a more sustainable future here on our planet. So good reason for us to mobilise the collective energy and talent of all of the young people associated with higher education and further education. And make no mistake, this challenge is not only of greater moral imperative than the moon landing, is also going to be far more challenging and complex. So understanding the interrelationships between these goals, these sustainable development goals, where measures taken to achieve the targets of one can often impact positively or negatively on those of another, is going to make it particularly challenging. And one thing is clear, we won't achieve these goals with business as usual. We'll need to change our behaviours, the way we treat each other and the environment around us, the way we work together, the way we do business, and the way we educate ourselves and our young people, who will be instrumental in steering us onto a more sustainable course and keeping us there in the future. So we're all probably familiar with SDG 4, target 4.7. It's quite explicit about promoting education or sustainable development through education for sustainable development. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's education for sustainable development, not necessarily about sustainable development. And this emphasises that whatever education we offer at higher education institutions, it should be designed to equip students with the knowledge and understanding and the skills and attributes needed to safeguard our environmental, social and economic well-being, sustainable development. And we will need to accept that, we will need some level of disruptive innovation in higher education to reorient teaching and learning to achieve this, with a focus on developing, this head, heart and hands competencies in our graduates by stimulating them to ask questions, analyse, be empathetic, think critically, and make decisions. Competencies and practices that offer opportunities for more interactive, exploratory, action-oriented, problem-based, experiential and transformative learning at university. In short, we should be preparing students for the world, the work of the world, not just the world of work. Indeed, placing ESD at the heart of higher education can effectively prepare students for both. So the question is, how can we do this? Well, it's unlikely that we'll do this with traditional approaches alone. Perhaps one of the more positive lasting legacies of the pandemic has been the disruption that's forced in the way that we teach within universities. It still may not be perfect, it may be far from it, but there is much that is good about the innovation that has been forced upon us. By contrast, inquiry-based or research-based teaching and learning refers to a range of pedagogical approaches which have student-led research at their heart, focusing on changing student and staff roles and the emphasis of the teaching content and the learning practice, effectively supporting students to become knowledge producers as opposed to knowledge consumers, and tackling real-world problems and changing staff-student roles and relationships, leading to more equitable teaching and learning partnerships throughout the learning process. So that brings us on to VIP. In 2012, Strathclyde, where we're from, adopted an approach to embedding research-based education in curricula from Georgia Institute of Technology. This approach or programme was called Vertically Integrated Projects, or VIP, and we became one of the early members of the international VIP consortium, which has now grown to a membership of around 50 universities worldwide. And the aim, the vertical term within vertically integrated projects refers to this vertically integrated dimension that you see here, which offers students the opportunity to participate in a research project for credit over the course of more than 1 year, depending on the flexibility of the student's degree programme. This could be anything up to 3 or 4 years participation, not to mention opportunities around summer internships to maintain continuity beyond the academic year and throughout the calendar year. I like to look at this from different perspectives: the students, the staff, or the faculty, and the project perspective. From the students' perspective, this offers them time and space to explore broader research areas before defining their research question and problem, and continuing then on to go on and tackle it and develop solutions appropriate for that. It allows them to build on the work of others that have gone before them and to set the direction of those who come after them. And it also offers an opportunity for collaboration with their peers from different year groups, building mentorship networks. It also offers them this space and time to develop and grow into these projects, and to also presents them with an opportunity to really develop some of the key competencies associated with ESD, these head, heart and hand competencies, which are also very valuable employability competencies, because we also want our graduates to get a job when they leave, as well as be good global citizens. So again, supporting this notion of preparing students for the world of work by tackling the work of the world, particularly given many career paths will inevitably be driven by the sustainability agenda. From an academic's perspective, this vertical dimension means they have access to a steady throughput of undergraduate research resource and from a project perspective, this continuity means that more longer term, more ambitious research objectives can be set. The horizontal dimension here enables multi and interdisciplinary research teams to be built. And interdisciplinarity and interdisciplinary collaboration between students in particular, perhaps not so much in terms of research, but certainly in an educational context with our students, is something that we haven't traditionally facilitated to any great broad extent across higher education, I would argue. And we should probably ask ourselves why that is the case. We should be offering students a more contemporary and authentic real-world experience, one that involves talking with and working collaboratively with other disciplines on real-world problems, finding that common vocabulary that's needed to work effectively in an interdisciplinary team, rather than waiting for them to graduate to gain any significant degree of experience in this respect. I'm going to try and play this video. Louise, you can interject if we can hear nothing, and then I can just carry on. If I don't hear from you, then I'll assume that things are going okay. Bear with me.
We can only hear it through your speaker, Scott.
So is it, you can't really hear it properly then?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I can only hear really faintly.
I did click the appropriate box on hop in, but it's fine, because really all that was going to do there was try and very succinctly summarise where it got to up until that point. But I can continue without that, don't worry about that too much. And we can also post in the chat the link to that small YouTube clip. It's a 2-minute clip. It's quite a nice way if you're trying to convey what I'm trying to convey here in 20 minutes to you and 2 minutes to a colleague, then I'd urge you to send them that clip along. Okay, so I've kind of told you where we were in 2012 with VIP and how we brought it over from Georgia Tech. Then in 2016, we took the VIP model for research-based education, and we effectively wrapped around it the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Or more specifically, we aligned our VIP programme with the UN SDGs. And we actually rebranded the programme VIP for Sustainable Development. And we put in place a process where any new VIP projects would have to justify which SDG goals and targets they specifically addressed, and how this would be woven into the project delivery and the students' education. And so, in effect, we have merged research-based education using the VIP model with education for sustainable development by aligning this with the UN SDGs to give us that real-world, challenge-driven context. And that, in effect, we would argue, provides us with a very practical model for embedding research-based education for sustainable development in undergraduate curricula at Strathclyde. Because we feel that research-based education for sustainable development can motivate students to actively participate in a deeper level of learning and understanding. And this is done by effectively raising the stakes from exam pass to delivering impact, where students can become motivated not only by their own personal academic gain, but by their potential to make a difference to the lives of people perhaps living in more vulnerable settings or communities from their own. And they can also have the opportunity to engage, sometimes directly, with people from these communities or the target communities of their projects, which can really inspire them to this, I would argue, to this deeper level of learning. So in 2019, so we went from 2012, 2016, a year after the SDGs came online, we aligned with them. And then in 2019, we were able to make a successful case to our own Education Strategy Committee and executive team of senior officers within our university to mainstream the programme, to go from pilot to mainstream. And so while the programme involves a diverse range of research areas, disciplines, departments and faculties, it is held together with and powered by this common sense of purpose, that of advancing Agenda 2030. And we now have 24 active projects, having grown from 8 in our pilot phase to 24 now across all faculties. And you can find many different examples of our projects and what they're all about from our website, which we can also post in the chat. In fact, our new challenge is whether we can find enough students to service all of these projects, but we're in the process of recruiting for the coming academic year, and hopefully that will be achieved. I think it's worth also mentioning that key to making a successful case for mainstreaming of our rebranded VIP for SD programme was being able to show how it aligned with and strengthened many other strategic objectives, such as those shown here, which in turn served to strengthen the position of the programme itself. So in effect, this became self-reinforcing with other strategic objectives that were in the university strategic plan. And also we were able to identify opportunities for enhancing the VIP for sustainable development experience, student experience, by embedding things like competency evaluation and self-reflection within it, embedding or integrating elements of COIL, collaborative online international learning. I noticed there was another session on that somewhere in today's proceedings, where we are able to join our student research teams up with student research teams from other universities or even stakeholder groups from other communities. We can also embed intercultural learning within this programme as well, and other aspects, address other aspects of widening access and decolonisation of our curriculum through this VIP for sustainable development platform and vehicle, allowing our students to engage with real people from real communities and people from different cultural backgrounds. And very significantly, VIP has paved the way for education for sustainable development to emerge as a key strategic objective at Strathclyde, with the programme itself being cited as an exemplar of how effectively we can embed ESD in curricula, and in particular, this brand of research-based education for sustainable development. And so I was delighted, Louise was delighted, a number of us were delighted at Strathclyde when in February of 2020, the university made it explicit for the first time in its Vision 2025 strategic plan, its commitment to place ESD at the heart of its curricula and for it to become, a key activity within our newly launched Centre for Sustainable Development, the home to all things related to sustainability. And as you'd imagine, of the 5 threads, education and activism is one of the key threads. And, along with Louise, we are very actively involved in trying to advance that ESD agenda through our relatively newly launched Centre for Sustainable Development. And we branded it ESD at Strath. And ESD at Strath agenda has its own key set of key activities that we are now working on to try and advance the broader ESD agenda. So taking VIP for sustainable development and using that as a launch pad for all things related to ESD. However, implementing change within higher education institutions is challenging. Convincing people of change is often difficult. Changes to entrenched teaching methods, changes to tightly regulated curricula, changes to degree accreditation criteria, changes in priorities, changes in mindsets. And so it really needs support from the top down, the bottom up, inside and outside your institution, from staff, from employers, from government, quality assurance agencies, from professional bodies and academies. And I think that gradually that support is starting to gather some serious momentum now. But change is definitely happening where traditionally higher education institutions have addressed sustainability mainly through their estates and operations. That's certainly been the case in the UK over the past 10, 15 years. It is very encouraging now to see many, certainly in the UK, like Strathclyde, that are now keenly focused on what they put in the minds of their students, as well on top of the roofs of their campus. And so to quote the words of John Maynard Keynes, perhaps the difficulty here lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping old ones. Well, we still have a role to play, or we all have a role to play, obviously, in securing a sustainable future for all. Our students of today will undoubtedly be significant actors in this, and so they will need a higher education system and curriculum that's fit for purpose, regardless of the discipline, and can equip them with the knowledge, the attributes, the values, and the competencies they need to meet these global challenges. Because, to paraphrase the quote that we started with, we have no choice here. This is a challenge that we must accept, one that we cannot postpone, and one that we must win, I would argue. And at that, I'm happy to either take some questions, or what I had also considered at this stage was posing a question or a couple of questions to our audience. And that is, well, one, does this model, could you see this model fitting within your own institution? And perhaps another question which might generate more discussion, within your institution, what would you see as the main challenges or barriers to the implementation of a programme such as this, or like this, or similar to this, or what challenges and barriers have you already experienced, perhaps, in trying to implement a programme like this? Because I think it'd be interesting to compare what your experiences are to the experiences that we've had at Strathclyde. So I'll hand it back to you at this stage, Jonas, to hopefully get some discussion going.
Super. That is that is very great. Thank you so much, Scott. And Louise, do come in whenever it is appropriate. There's one question actually in the chat, and there's a second one coming in. So Scott, with your permission, we'll start with those, and then anybody who has comments on the two questions that you just posed, Scott, please also feel free to use the chat function. We have about 15 minutes left, just to look at the watch here, but we should have ample time. So the first question, Scott and Louis, to you was here from Aphrodite. How many students have been engaged in the in your project, in the VIP project so far, and is it evaluated or self-assessed by the students in terms of knowledge application?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah,
Okay.
go,
So we have around 150 students per year taking part in VIP. I joined the VIP programme as a staff member 2 years ago, but I actually took part in VIP as an undergraduate at Strathclyde and then taught on a VIP programme when I was completing my PhD. So I've had quite the VIP journey in a lot of ways. But part of my role is to try and expand the number of students that take part in VIP. So at the moment, we have around 150 students a year. But at Georgia Tech, where the model originated, they have around 1,000 students per year. And obviously, the American education system is quite different from the UK. So it will take us quite a significant amount of time to reach that level. But that's kind of what we're aiming for, and that those students are across 24 projects at the moment. And to answer the question about assessment, so students do take part in VIP for academic credit. It isn't an extracurricular programme, and we don't recommend that they take part for extra credit. We do find that it's quite a significant amount of work, and it's also a very different way of working for a lot of students. Most of our students come from the second or third year of their degrees. In Scotland, students' undergraduate degrees are over 4 years. So we usually have students coming mainly from second and third year, and it's quite new for them. These students won't have a lot of research experience. They don't often tend to have a lot of collaborative working experience, especially across disciplines and with staff and with students from different levels of study. So it is quite challenging. And one of the things that we like to reward through VIP, as Scott mentioned, is also their competency and skills development, particularly around education for sustainable development. So they're assessed both on their disciplinary knowledge that they gain through their project, but also we're trying to bring more robustly into the assessment, their competency development, their skills, their professional skills, their sustainability skills, and that's something that we're paying quite a lot of attention to this year, particularly as we've launched a pilot with Practera. They're an ed tech company who've worked with a lot of universities, I think. I know they've worked with Boston University, quite a few universities in Australia, which I think where Practera is based. And their platform allows students to track and evidence their skills development, as well as track the development of their project as they go through the academic year. So this is our kind of first attempt to really bring that competency development into the assessment in quite a kind of robust and regimented way. So hopefully that answers your question. We could go into a bit more detail about the assessment, Scott, if you wanted to maybe share.
I'll let Jonas decide if he wants to perhaps move on, but I'm happy to embellish on that.
I think that is actually great. I'm going to ask, Scott, could you stop sharing your screen? Then I think it's easier to see our videos. Excellent, super, thanks so much. I have another person here, Elizabeth. I think she is trying to come in and pose a question directly to us. I want to see if I can let her in. Elizabeth, you are with us. You can be seen on the screen, everyone can hear you. So if you have a question or comment, did you want to pose a question?
No, I'm just trying to figure out how to use the platform. So I've been listening and it's
another of those. That's excellent. No problem at all. I'll try to get you out of this session here again. But if you have a question, please use the chat function. Well, this is great. Maybe Luis and Scott, to those competencies you were just going into, Luis, can you elaborate a little bit on that? What are the competencies that you see the students acquire through these VIP projects, different than going through a regular curriculum? What are the competencies you are trying to get at? You were giving some references, but not yet really specific. But maybe talk a little bit about this and also how you see the effectiveness. I know that you've said you're starting this project with this external evaluator, but maybe you have already some insights from your, at least anecdotal insights from your past projects.
Yeah, exactly. All of the evidence we have so far is anecdotal, and we do see the students develop these skills, and of course we see students develop these skills in their sort of regular disciplinary modules that aren't experiential, but we use the Unesco framework. So the 8 competencies, I was trying to remember now, strategic competency, critical thinking, integrated problem solving, normative competency, anticipatory competency, self-awareness. There's another couple.
Systems thinking.
Systems thinking. There's one that we're forgetting, but everyone knows them.
Critical
Everyone here
thinking,
will
maybe.
know
I
them.
don't know if you said critical thinking. Yeah, so it's the 8 competencies that are used in the UNESCO framework, and also these are the same competencies that in the UK there's recently been published ESD guidance for embedding ESD in higher education, and that's been published by the Higher Education Academy here in the UK and also the Quality Assurance Agency, and these are the UNESCO competencies that they subscribe to as well, and they've classified them or subcategorized them as ways of being, ways of thinking, and ways of practicing. So again, it's that head, heart, and hands framework. And as Louise had said there, we've long felt that our students were, definitely developing these types of competencies through their BIP journey, because we speak to our students and we talk with them and we get great feedback from them. But we wanted a more robust means of being able to evidence this, because we want to be able to test the efficacy of the programme. Is it doing what we think it's doing as effectively as we hope it is? Or are there any gaps in that? But also to give our students the opportunity to understand exactly how, where and when they're developing these competencies throughout their journey, because very often these competencies sit at a meta level in education, and students are very focused on the disciplinary subject area, and not made particularly aware by us or anyone else of these competencies that they're developing, which quite often, are the real skills and attributes that employers are looking for, quite apart from the disciplinary knowledge. And so we were keen to try and provide them with a platform that would assist them in identifying this and helping them being able to articulate to themselves and to future employers how they've developed these competencies through their participation in our programme.
Excellent. Well, we certainly look forward to the outcomes from your from that project to review that even further. I'm looking here at the chat. Please do feel free, anybody here viewing us right now, to continue using the chat function to pose questions, or any other means you find to participate here. I wanted to come back to those internal challenges that you were talking about, Scott, and you posed that question to everybody here, but maybe the question goes back to you now. You obviously, you talked about how the projects align with the overall strategic goals of the universities and of your university, and so I can guess this is a particular way of how to approach the challenge of how to make it work. You just alluded to that, but can you maybe give us a few other challenges, maybe at the beginning of such a journey, that you faced and how you overcame them internally at the university to make VIP work?
Yeah, no, so I think probably, when I speak to colleagues in the ESD community, certainly here in Scotland and in the UK, one of the big challenges is getting into institutional buy-in. But that is perhaps becoming less of a challenge, given how urgent these existential global challenges are becoming now. But there is still the need to try and get that buy-in at the kind of higher levels, as well as amongst staff and students. And I think my best advice in order to do that would be to start small and build. Much easier to go to an executive team or an education strategy committee with not a blank sheet of paper, something to show, even if it is just anecdotal evidence that you have that something has got the germ of an idea there, more than the germ of an idea. Something's actually been tested out to some extent, and that's what we did with our pilot scheme. And it was through the pilot that we were able to then start thinking about some of the other strategic objectives that this could align with and build the case for this type of work. But also another key thing was approaching staff, building a coalition of the willing. So being pragmatic, understanding that this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. In order to develop that pilot, we approached staff that we knew were interested in this area, and staff that we knew would walk the walk as well as talk the talk, staff who would engage, set up their own VIP projects, work with us to develop examples of good practice and catalogue lessons learned. And again, through that, we were able to build up a small portfolio of projects that we could call a VIP for Sustainable Development Programme. So those are two of the key things I would say in terms of getting up and running. Some of the other challenges have been very much logistical around things like finding a pathway through a degree programme that is vertically integrated. So I talked before about there is the potential for these programmes to operate across 3 or 4 years, but that depends on whether you can carve that pathway out through the curricula of your degree programme. And sometimes it depends on the degree programme and the discipline and the faculty and the department and the degree accreditation and regulatory criteria. That depends how constricted that pathway actually is. So it's working to try and relax some of these things or find workarounds around about them. And we've managed to do that successfully for some degree programmes, more than we have perhaps for some others. But again, you just have to be pragmatic. We ask staff who want to start a VIP programme that the minimum requirement is that they can guarantee that it can be offered to students within their programme for a minimum of 2 years within that degree programme. That doesn't have to be 2 consecutive years. It can be 2 years interrupted. But as long as there is space and time for students to engage for at least 2 years, then that's fine. But we do have examples of students who have been involved with VIP from year 2 through to year 5. And some of these students have even gone on to do PhDs.
Excellent. We have about 2 minutes left. May I ask, Louise or Scott, you were talking about the network of about 50 universities. Could you put that in the chat for anybody who would like to find out more?
Sure.
And then maybe last question goes to you, Louise. I mean, you were talking about being a student yourself earlier. So just in a few words, I mean, can you tell us about the project that you were engaged in? And obviously it landed you a job. That's great. Congrats. But maybe tell us a little bit about what was the project you worked on?
Yeah, so very different. My undergrad degree was in English, and I took part in, it was a VIP called Text Lab, and I'll actually put a link in the chat to a page that shows all the different projects that we have. Text Lab brought together students from English and computer science, and they developed technology to digitally analyse Shakespeare's plays. So I suppose the SDG link isn't immediately apparent, but what we did is we took that technology out to schools in Glasgow and the local area to sort of try and get students and pupils in schools enthused about literature, but also to try and enhance their digital literacy skills. So that was what that project focused on, and it was my first time engaging with any students outside of my home department as an undergraduate, which is the kind of I think Scott has kind of said this before. When he was a student, the only time he engaged with students outside of his degree was at the pub, and it was kind of the same for me until I took part in that project. And it's a really useful experience, because obviously when you enter the workplace, you have to work with and engage with people from a range of backgrounds. And I gained some really interesting skills trying to develop that project with students from come from a different perspective from mine. And then my PhD was, again, something completely different, but I used it's in the field of digital humanities, which is what that project was engaged with. And the staff member who led that project actually got a job at another university, and then no one else in the department had the skills, so I ended up teaching it again, and that's how I met Scott and Steve, who's the other director of the programme. And I found it really interesting. My PhD was finishing, and I was like, actually, do you have an opening? So that was it, really, and here we are. So
I mean, in all seriousness, though, I mean that was a really critical point in the journey, because in order to go from pilot to mainstream, we needed that full-time resource, and the pilot was critical in us being able to make the case to our executive team to invest in that full-time resource, and that full-time resource has been Louise for the past 2 years.
Yeah, so we're putting the business case forward to extend that position. So
yeah, to make it a permanent position. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is great. We are coming to a close, so really thank you so much for your, for sharing these experiences with us here. And I think all the viewers here got something out of it. I was just prompted to slowly close the session because we are going back to the main room. Thanks so much, Louise, also for that link here. Anybody who wants to find out more, please have a look here at the VIP Consortium. Last but not least, the world is going to look very soon to Glasgow again with COP26. So best of luck to making all the participants feel welcome. And of course, we look to you to help us, of course, make this not just the VIP, but of course, COP26. I mean, the world is looking to you to make that a successful outcome for those existential challenges, Scott, that you were alluding to. So thanks again, and best of luck with the continued progress of your program at Strathclyde University. So thanks to both of you, and thanks for everybody who participated in today's session and for the questions you posed here.
Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonas.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye. No? Bye-bye.
Bye.